What's happening, cat daddies and foxy mamas? It's the Blaxploitation fanatic back with another episode of the Blaxploitation Appreciation Podcast, where we celebrate Blaxploitation culture from music to movies to books and everything in between. So let's go ahead and jump into today's episode. And today, y'all, our movie is one of, if not the most influential movie of the Blaxploitation genre, and that is Superfly. Now, for me, it is definitely one of my top four Blaxploitation movies. I usually say top three with Shaft, Superfly, and the Mac, but gotta add number four being Coffee with Pam Grier. And I'm willing to bet if you were to ask most Blaxploitation fans, appreciators of the genre, Superfly would probably be in their top five. And this is actually the movie that is pretty much responsible for coining the term Blaxploitation, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Now, there's a lot of people that have talked about this movie because of just, again, how influential and important it is. Shout out to my guys over at, again, the Black Death One-on-One podcast. They did an episode on it. Go check it out. But Superfly came out in 1972, and it was put out by Warner Brothers. Now, at its core, this is basically a film about a dope dealer trying to get out of the game. That's really what it's about. And I would tend to say, man, the first 10 minutes of this movie to me is better than most movies, especially Blaxploitation movies altogether. So just the first 10 minutes of this movie. So I am a true fan of Superfly, and we'll get into some of the controversy around it. But who do you have in the movie? Well, my man Ron O'Neal, who played Youngblood Priest, the main character protagonist of Superfly. And the thing about this, man, is if there was ever an actor who fell victim to typecasting, it was Ron O'Neal, because not a lot of people know, man, Ron O'Neal was a classically trained actor. I think he did some Broadway stuff. But if you were to ask 9 out of 10 people what they know Ron O'Neal for, it would probably be Superfly. And that's unfortunate because dude was a great actor. He did a couple of other movies in the Blaxploitation genre. He did The Hitter with I think Sheila Fraser, who was in this with him, was in that one. And I know my man Adolph Caesar was in that. And then he did Brothers with Bernie Casey. And again, he was just a great actor, but unfortunately, it just typecast as Priest and Superfly, and that's what people got to know him for. You also have in this movie, his right-hand man was Carl Lee. He played a character named Eddie. And so he was, when I talk about kind of like the story behind it, he was Priest's main man, who Priest wanted to get out of the game. Eddie wanted to stay in the game. You had the lovely Sheila Fraser as Priest's main squeeze, Georgia, and she reunited with him in the sequel to Superfly TNT as well. And then two other actors who had major roles was my man Charles McGregor, who played Fat Freddy. And the interesting thing about Charles McGregor is this dude, he spent 28 years in prison for two murders, double murder. I mean, I don't know if it was the same incident or if it was two different murders, but a man was in prison for like 28 years, then got out and did some acting. And then he did several Blaxploitation movies. He did Three the Hard Way. He was in That's the Way of the World, the movie with Earth, Wind, and Fire, and a couple others. And then someone else you may know is Julius Harris, who played Scatterman, who was kind of like Priest's connect to help him when Priest wanted to move up to buying bigger weight. Scatterman was the connect to help him get there. And you guys probably know Julius Harris from, he played Tommy Gibbs' father, Fred Williamson, and Hell Up in Harlem and Black Caesar. He played Bubbletop Woodson, and I think it was either Uptown Saturday Night or Let's Do It Again, one of the ones with Bill Cosby and Sidney Poitier. And then he was in several other movies. So those were kind of like the main five: Ron O'Neal, Carl Lee, Sheila Fraser, Charles McGregor, and Julius Harris. Okay. And like I said, if I were to tell you about the movie, there's a bunch of other people that have done the synopsis reviews on this movie. Shout out to again Nubius Black and Johnny Death over at the Black Death 101 podcast because they did an episode on Superfly. So I may not be adding anything new, but I just wanted to give my take on it. So the overview of it is, like I said, Priest, he's a cocaine dealer who wants to get out of the game, and he has a plan for like one final score that will allow him to walk away, him and Eddie to walk away with $1 million cash. So that's what he's kind of got in mind is, dude, let's do this one final score. We can get out of the game and walk away and not have to worry about this stuff anymore. He then reaches out to Scatter, Julius Harris, for help in buying the product that he needs to kind of go up and get enough to make that one last score. Now, one of his dealers, Fat Freddy, gets popped, and when Freddy got popped by the cops, he ultimately winds up ratting Priest out. Now, how this all came about, let me share a scene with you. Freddy owed Priest some money, and Priest was like, "Man, you gotta get my money." So, Freddy went out, did the job, got the money, but ultimately, not because of what he did, but in another incident, Freddy got poached by the cops. And basically, when they took him in, they shook him down to get information on who he was working for. He gave up Priest. But let me show you this scene where Priest kind of went hard on Freddy because Freddy owed him some money. So let's peep that real quick.
This ain't the first time for you, Trick. I've had to wait for as long as a month on you for my money. Now, you trying to take advantage of me, Freddy. This time your black ass is going to work.
Priest, all I do is sell coke, man. I don't do no violence. I don't mess with no fire.
No, listen, don't argue with me, man. I'm trying to give you a chance. Now, you don't get me my money tonight. I'm gonna put that young girl of yours out on Horse Road.
Listen, Priest, that's my wife you talking about,
so
man.
So what? Now, somebody's going to work tonight, Freddy. You really shouldn't have fucked with my money, Freddy.
You're gonna get my money too. Oh man, gotta love it. And then so like I said, Freddy gets him the rats Priest out. He with Priest actually, in terms of wanting to get out of the game, he tells Georgia, his girl, about it, and she's excited because she's down for it. She want to get out of the game, live a regular normal life. During all this, Priest and Eddie get hemmed up by the mob, who find out that they're trying to buy more weight because it was Scatter's Connect. And so basically they're now saying that, hey, you're gonna sell for us. And so Eddie's excited about it because he's like, hey, we cut Scatter out and now we get to deal directly with the Connect. But Priest, he really ain't feeling it. So then Scatterman, because they don't need him anymore, he gets killed trying to go on the run but what he did, because he knew that they were after him, he gave Priest the lowdown on the man who's kind of behind all of this. Now, Priest, once he finds this out, he goes to see Eddie to tell him, man, look, I'm out. I'm done with this. I'm out. Well, there's no loyalty amongst hustlers. So Eddie winds up snitching Priest out to the big man's cronies, and they send the police after him. Now they're trying to bust him with either, the money or the product, but Priest is clean because what he's done is he's covertly given, the money that he was going to walk away with. He's given that to Georgia, who was in disguise. So when the cops do ultimately pick Priest up and take him to this big boss guy, the big boss is trying to tell Priest he can't quit. I own you, type of deal. And Priest is like, nah, man, that ain't going down. And so basically, it ends up where Priest kind of lets him know, I took a policy out for you, big man, and if something happens to me, you and your whole family, it's over with. So that is really kind of how it all boiled down to it. Now, in addition to the top actors that played in there, you had some heavy hitters in the directing and producing vein. So the director was Gordon Parks Jr. Gordon Parks Sr., his father, was the one that produced or directed Shaft. Gordon Parks Jr. did Superfly. And then the producer was Sig Short, and Sig Short did several other Blaxploitation movies as well. Like I said, he did the That's the Way of the World, the Earth, Wind, and Fire movie that Charles McGregor was also in, and then a couple of others. So that's kind of what you had. Oh, and regarding Sig Shore, the kind of the man, the quote unquote man who was behind all of this, who didn't want to let Priest get out of the game and said Priest was working for him. Was, the character was named Deputy Commissioner Reardon. But Sig Shore, the producer, played that role. He didn't come into the movie until at the very end, like the last 3 or 4 minutes of the movie. And he was in the credits, he was billed as Mike Richards, but it was actually Sig Shore, the producer. So, a little interesting note there. Now, again, if we talk about the impact that the movie had, well, let's go back and talk again. One of the things I love and why I say this movie, the first 10 minutes of it was better than most Blaxploitation movies as a whole, is just in the first 10 minutes alone, you got beautiful scenes shot in, Harlem, New York. You got Priest looking Superfly with Superfly. You got Priest looking cool with the threads that he has on. You got the scene where he's just kind of like chilling with his lady in the bed. You got the music from Curtis Mayfield, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So it was just a whole bunch of stuff going on. So I want to show you kind of part of the opening scene where Priest leaves and gets into his rides in the movie were Fly. So I want to show you this scene where he goes and hops in his ride. So let's check that one out real quick. So, he was dressed to the nines, man, dapper down, got in the Fly Cadillac Eldorado pimp mobile. So that is some of the finer parts of the movie. But again, if we kind of talk about some of its influence and impact, I said that Superfly could be single-handedly responsible for the coining of the term Blaxploitation, and that I mentioned this a few episodes back. But for those that don't know, the word Blaxploitation was kind of brought into the landscape by a guy by the name of Junius Griffin, who was the head of a chapter of the NAACP. I don't know if it was LA or not. I believe it was LA. But what happened is he was like a press agent, public relations type of guy. And he was trying to get the account for this movie, for Superfly. And when he did not get the account, he started bad mouthing it and saying negative things about the movie and saying it was exploitative and calling it black exploitation, which ultimately morphed into Blaxploitation. So I always like to say that he came up with the term out of spite, like because he didn't get the movie. Now, had he got the account for the movie, would we even have the term Blaxploitation? Who knows? And here's the thing: this developed into him and Roy Ennis developed this coalition against Blaxploitation to start trying to protest against black movies. Prior to the term Blaxploitation, a lot of people referred to these types of films as Black Power movies, which is very much more positive than the term Blaxploitation. But the interesting thing about Junius Griffin as a whole, and I mentioned this a few episodes back, is he wound up executive producing a Blaxploitation movie, Detroit 9000, which, I liked it. And so just the fact that, again, he came up with it because he couldn't get the account of Superfly is pretty interesting. Now, with Superfly, there are people who will laud this movie for its social context. Some people, I've heard people say, well, Priest is an anti-hero who's a hero, because he's sticking it to the man and, he's forced into the game and, but he's trying to get out. So, they'll applaud it and laud it for its social context. But then there's others, and this was back at the time when it first came out, and still even today, there are others who will bash this movie saying it glorifies drug dealing and hustler culture. But really, again, at its core, the story is about a dealer trying to get out of the life, not glorifying it. But one of the things that I will say is I can see how some people say that, because there have been people who have said that Superfly influenced them to get into the dope game, like Freeway Ricky Ross, not the rapper, but the drug dealer, the big drug dealer, Freeway Ricky Ross. He has mentioned that Superfly influenced him to get into drug dealing. And one of the scenes in the movie that I kind of think for anybody that does say this encouraged him to get into the game, this is the scene that I think they probably would refer to.
You're gonna give all this up. 8-track stereo, color TV in every room, and can snort a half a piece of dope every day. That's the American dream, nigga.
That's the American dream. So, and then some people will even say, as we talk about cultural impact, some people will even say that Superfly transcends Blaxploitation genre as a whole, but it's not even a Blaxploitation movie. I have a friend who is like a professor of film studies at one of the local universities, and we had this conversation, and he said, based on how he defines Blaxploitation, he said that Superfly falls outside of the Blaxploitation genre. Now, of course, I wasn't feeling that, and most people that you would talk to will probably say, nah, Superfly is definitely Blaxploitation. And to me, at its simplest core definition, what I term Blaxploitation is movies made in the 70s, so from 1970 to 79, that were primarily Black themed, predominantly Black cast, Black storyline, plot, and the whole nine. So whether it was produced, directed by a white person or a Black person, to me, if it was in the 70s, it was predominantly Black cast and told a Black storyline. To me, that's what I consider falls in the Blaxploitation genre. And I think also that's, for me, why when a lot of people might say Blaxploitation was negative, I don't feel that way, because again, a lot of the movies that fall into my definition, they were pure, wholesome, wonderful movies. So, that's just how I look at it, and that's the way we approach it on this show. Now, there are a couple of pet peeves that I have about Superfly, and not the movie in itself, but I think how it's perceived and what things that have happened as a result of it. And so my three biggest pet peeves are, number one, people who think Superfly was a pimp. Like I said, he was a coke dealer trying to get out of the game. So sometimes when people don't really know, and I think that's the people who kind of lump the negativity of Blaxploitation, saying it was about pimps and pushers and the whole that. A lot of people may confuse or think that Superfly was a pimp movie and that Priest was a pimp. He wasn't. He was a drug dealer. The second thing that's a pet peeve of mine is the fact that some people think his character's name was Superfly. It wasn't. His character's name was Youngblood Priest. So when I hear people say, refer to the character as Superfly, I get ticked off about that. And then the third thing is that's a pet peeve of mine are the sequels and the remakes. There was Superfly came out in 1972. There was a sequel in 1973, Superfly TNT, which was Ron O'Neal, Sheila Frazier. Superfly TNT was okay. There's no way it was going to stand up and compare to the original, but it was just, again, it. Then in 1990, there was a movie made called The Return of Superfly with this guy named Nathan Purdy, and he played Youngblood Priest, and that was just a horrible movie, man. I remember when it came out in 1990, and then recently, I think it was either 2024 or 2025, there was a remake of Superfly. I didn't see that at all, but for me, because I love Blaxploitation and I deem a lot of these as classics, I don't even want to entertain the thought of remaking some of these. And so just the fact that somebody thought they could remake Superfly, just I'm not feeling it. Okay. So again, that is to me one of the best blaxploitation movies. Superfly, definitely very important in the genre and has a huge impact. So for most of you watching my show or listening to it, you probably have seen it many a times like me. But if you're new to this and you're like, oh, what's this about? Definitely go check out Superfly. All right. So now, with that in mind, we're going to shift to the book. And this is very interesting because our book for this week is a book called Dealer by Richard Woodley. And here's why this is interesting. This book is practically the impetus for Superfly as a movie, almost as if, and I have no proof of this, but it's almost as if they could have stole the story for Superfly from this book here. It came out in 1971 on Warner Paperback Library. And what it is, it's not a fictional novel. It's actually, it was written by a journalist named Richard Woodley, who had kind of followed this drug dealer around. Now that's just the guy in the car. I hope that's not the drug dealer himself, that he would put himself out there like that. But he followed this drug dealer around named Jimmy, and kind of his life and as a dealer and the things he went through. And there are tons of parallels in between the book and the movie. So much so that, in the book itself, Jimmy wants to get out of the game. He has a close buddy in the book named Slick, who kind of would have been the equivalent to the Eddie character from the movie. He has a girlfriend named Phil, who's kind of like a square and kind of wants to just live the normal life like Georgia and to Priest in the movie. And then he had situations kind of like the same where Fat Freddy owed Priest money. He talks about situations with some of his runners or his dealers owing him money. And even so much so that this is a cover of the hardcover. This is the Coke spoon. Like Priest had a Coke spoon that he wore on his chain around the neck. It was his was more a cross, but had the little spoon at the end. And if you look at the cover of this book, this is the hardcover. This is the cover of the hardcover edition. That's what I'm trying to say. And then this is the paperback edition. Okay. So, and that scene where, Eddie was describing the American dream and all the stuff in crib, there's actually a point in the book where we talk about what's in Jimmy's house that when I read this, I was like, this is almost like, so let me read this real quick. We talk about Jimmy's house. Floor was covered with a thick pile carpet of deep red. Curtains were drawn behind a long brown sofa, which faced on the opposite side of the room a large color television. Beside the sofa was a Princess model telephone, blah, blah, blah. Along one wall was an assemblage of high-quality electronic gear, a blend of Sony, KLH, Learjet, and amplifiers, receivers, tape deck, speakers, turntable, and then it goes on to talk about some others. But it made me think of a scene when Eddie was like, color TV in every room, 8-track stereo. It's like, it's almost a parallel between the book and the movie in and of itself. The screenwriter for Superfly, the movie, was Philip Fenty. And I was trying to do some research to see if Philip Fenty and Richard Woodley ever knew each other, or if it might have even been one of those situations where they were the same person, one guy using a pseudonym. But based on what I could kind of hunt down, it was not, doesn't seem like they ever met. But again, not saying that Superfly was a ripoff from the book, but it is very close and a lot of parallels. So I would not be surprised if later on we found out that this book was the catalyst that led to the writing of Superfly as a movie. Okay. All right. So that's the book. It's kind of like a series of articles and journalistic writings that Richard Woodley did following this person. So it doesn't read like a traditional blaxploitation paperback novel, but again, still a great read. All right. So then that leads us to our last thing for the week, and that is our music. And so we're back to one of those episodes where the music and the movie are the same, because the soundtrack to Superfly by Curtis Mayfield is, to me, one of, if not the best soundtracks ever. And I'm not just talking Blaxploitation, I'm talking movie soundtracks, period, all genres. Came out in 1972 with the movie, of course, with on Curtom Records, which is a record label. Curtis Mayfield and Eddie Thomas, I think his name was, had their own record label. So this came out on the label. And man, from the get-go in the movie, with, again, how I said the first 10 minutes of the movie is better than most movies, the entire thing. The first 10 minutes of the movie, we get 3 songs from the soundtrack. And so, Curtis Mayfield, man, just soul, pure soul. And you could feel that dripping throughout the movie. And several of the songs are plastered and sprinkled throughout. And that's the other thing, is like, sometimes on soundtracks, you have songs that don't really play a part in the movie, or it's such a small snippet. I mean, they played extended versions almost in scenes of the movie, of the music, and it just enhanced and helped the movie even more. Curtis made, the soundtrack in and of itself has been sampled numerous times by various hip hop artists and not hip hop artists. I mean, if I ran down the list, this is just some that I know of, that I kind of knew songs that I was like, yeah, that was from Superfly, that was from Freddie's Dead and all that. But you got Snoop Dogg, Eminem, J. Cole, Ice-T, Busta Rhymes, UGK, Ludacris, Diggable Planets, Detroit's Most Wanted, Ghetto Boys, Audio 2, Nelly, and a whole bunch more. That's the hip hop. And outside of hip hop R&B vein, you had Mary J. Blige, Erykah Badu, and then even Victoria Beckham, which kind of blew me away. So former Spice Girl Victoria Beckham sampled one of the songs off of this. Think she sampled for one of her songs. And when I was growing up, either my mom or my auntie had the soundtrack, the album. And I remember always looking at this. This is the back of the album. I remember always looking at this, man, and being like, oh man, I used to look at that picture of that one right there and be like, oh man, that's scary looking. That guy must have really got beat down. And one of the things I like to say is this, every image on here kind of represents one of the songs. So if we look, this probably represents Freddie's Dead. This one is when Priest got jumped by a junkie. So there's a song on there called Junkie Chase, and he was chasing the junkie. So that represents Junkie Chase. Him and Georgia and Ty represents Give Me Your Love, or is it Give Me Your Love? What's the name of it? Yeah, Give Me Your Love. That one started a movie, Little Child Running Wild. I would probably say this one represents, I would say, if I looked at the name of it, this probably represents No Thing on Me. This is Pusher Man. Well, no, this is well, this probably doesn't represent the name of one of the songs. It just would have been, yeah, probably Superfly, even though that's not a character's name. And then I left this for last because this guy right here, his name is Casey. In the credits, there is, like, when you look at who's in the movie, there was a part in the credits that says introducing Casey. Like, who the heck is Casey? And it turns out that Casey was a real pimp in Harlem. And where he comes into play is the scene I showed you with Priest driving the ride, the customized Eldorado, the Cadillac, the L-Dog. That was Casey's car. And what happened is, I guess someone affiliated with the movie, I don't know if it was producer Sig Shore himself, but someone affiliated with the movie saw his ride and asked if they could use it for the movie. So he wound up allowing him to use his car, wound up getting a part in the movie, playing a pimp. Just, I think he was in 2 scenes. One scene was in the club. I think both scenes were in the club. 2 of his girls were fighting, and he picked him up around. And then one, he had like a brief, short conversation with Priest. But that was very interesting to me, man. Is that, and so when I look at that, I'm like, wow. And it made me also think of if I take you back to the first episode where we talked about the Mac, at the beginning of the Mac, there was the movie of, or there was the little piece that said "In Memory of a Man, Frank Ward." We talked about Frank Ward being a real pimp in Oakland and how him and his brother got into the movie The Mac. Now, Casey didn't get killed or anything like Frank Ward did, but again, just interesting that a true real pimp got put into this movie. All right. But again, one of, if not the best soundtrack ever. So definitely check this out. All right. So then before we get out of here, as always, I like to show you what people are going out on, for those of us true fans that want to be the star of our own Blaxploitation movie or book. And, you can go out to the site blaxploitme.com, get out the way there, and go do your own movie poster. So the entry for this week comes from my man, Doc Strange. He's a hip hop artist out of Texas, and he did this poster called The Uncanny. So looks pretty cool. And if you want to go get up on some of his hip hop, you can check him out at docstrange.net. So all right there, Doc Strange, all one word, .net, my man. And so several of his songs, you could tell he's influenced by Blaxploitation because he'll drop some Blaxploitation funk sample type of stuff in some of his stuff as well. So go check him out. All right. So that's what we got for this week, Foxy Mamas and Cat Daddies. Again, if you want to go check our stuff out, peep the movie Superfly, one of the best Blaxploitation movies in the genre. The book Dealer by Richard Woodley might even be the impetus or the catalyst for the movie Superfly. And then lastly, the soundtrack to the movie itself. So that's what we got for you. Love you as always. Appreciate the comments and just the love y'all been sending. So come on back. Check us out on the next episode. All right. Peace.